I never felt comfortable telling anyone the following experience I had when I was young, partly because it felt too unbelievable, but I promise you that it did happen to me. 16 years ago, when I was just 17 and still living with my parents, I began to notice that when I was in my own company, I never felt that I was alone. There was always a sense that I was being watched, and this happened so often that I began to worry that I had some kind of mental disorder. For a while, it was only a feeling that bothered me but wasn't too serious. Then it escalated to seeing fleeting dark shapes and movement in my peripheral vision. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. By now, I was really fearing for my sanity and thought about telling my parents but didn't want to worry them. One night when I was on my way to bed, I was physically pushed and almost fell over, and this terrified me. I spun around and saw nobody behind me, and I ran to my bedroom as if that would be a safe place. I realized that these things were not in my mind, but were really happening. But what in the heck was it? That night, I drifted into sleep eventually, only to wake up to my blanket being pulled from me onto the floor, and as I quickly sat up in bed, I heard heavy breathing, so I turned on my lamp to see an empty room. I was practically hysterical but didn't dare move. Then I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, but once again when I looked in the direction of it, there was nothing there. After that night, I spent as much time as possible at my boyfriend's house, and nothing ever happened to me when I was with him. But when I was home alone, I almost always had things happen to me that were unexplainable. From the day I got married and moved out from my parents' house, I haven't had a single supernatural experience, I'm glad to say. But I would really like to know who or what put me through those things.
I followed what must have been a ghost. There are some long rural walkways near where we live, and I often choose them for my nightly wanders, as I'm more often than not the only person on them, and I love the peaceful feeling I get. However, one night about 2 years ago, I was about 30 minutes into my walk, and I noticed what looked like a man ahead of me, but it was quite dark, so I couldn't tell whether he was walking toward me or in the same direction. But I slowed down a little as I had no desire to catch up to him. I soon realized he must be walking the same way I was, so I relaxed a little, as I didn't have to think about greeting him as we passed. Another 5 minutes went by, and I noticed that the gap between us never seemed to change. And I thought to myself, we must be walking at pretty much the exact same pace. So I slowed down to increase the distance between us, only it never changed. He appeared to be the exact same distance from me. I didn't see how that could be, so I started to speed up just to see if I could get a little closer to him, as it was annoying me. To my surprise, this also changed nothing, so I began to jog. I could always stop if I got too close. This also made no difference in how far apart we were, and now I was confused and a little scared, I have to admit. How could he be adjusting his speed when I'm behind him? I had the idea to stop walking and thought that this had to work and he would disappear out of sight. Only he did not. Had he stopped too? By now I was really worried, so I took out my flashlight that I always carried, and although it felt like a rude thing to do, I aimed it at him, and what I saw will be with me forever. As the light hit him, he was clearly facing me and stood looking at me, and when I moved the beam to his face, there were absolutely no features. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a blank patch of skin, and in that instant the whole thing disappeared into the path straight down like it fell into a hole. But there was no hole. I was totally terrified and ran home faster than I thought I could run and sat on my garden bench for at least 15 minutes to catch my breath and compose myself before my wife saw me.
This experience made me realize that there is something more after death. I was living in an old house at the time that often felt like it had an energy about it, and that's why I liked it so much. And for the first few months, nothing happened. Then small things began occurring. On occasion, I would be looking for something in a place I thought I'd left it, to find that it had been moved somewhere else. I would hear indistinct noises during the night, and sometimes be woken up to noises in other parts of the house. At first, I put it all down to my own absent-mindedness, the house settling, and my imagination. After many months of these things going on, I started to think maybe there was more to it than that, as I began to hear voices downstairs from my bedroom. They were low and unclear, but the tone was a man's, and this terrified me. I was too scared to go down and look. In fact, I was terrified. One night I woke up thirsty and went downstairs to get a drink. Nothing had happened that night before I'd gone to sleep, so I wasn't particularly concerned. As I opened the door to my living room on my way to the kitchen and turned on the light, and my heart stopped as I saw an old man sitting in one of my chairs. I froze on the spot as he looked straight at me. He was totally expressionless, but looking straight into my eyes. I have never felt fear like I was feeling in that moment, and as I stood unable to move or think of what to do, he just dissolved in front of me, and he was gone. I returned to my bedroom when my legs allowed, and stayed until morning but never slept a wink.